Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to West Devon Management Development Licensing Committee. Before we get going on the agenda, I'll just ask members of the committee to identify themselves for those here today. My name's Rick Cheadle. I represent Buckland Monacorum and I chair the Planning Committee.
Cathy Hall, Democratic Services Officer, West Devon.
Terry Southcott, Bridgestone Ward and Vice Chair of this committee.
Jacqueline Houselander, Lead Officer for the Development Management Committee this morning.
Catherine Bowen, Legal Advisor to the committee.
Bryony Hanlon, Senior Planning Officer for West Devon.
Caroline Mott, Lead Member for Planning.
Ursula Mann, representing Tavistock North.
Alistair Cunningham, Buckland Monacorum Ward.
Sam Wakeham, Councillor for Hatherley Ward.
Patrick Kimber, Hatherley Ward.
Tony Leach, Oakhampton.
Jeff Moody, Tavistock North Ward.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Jury and Councillor Kimber is substituting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest?
Yeah. Yes, I've got interest in the application of today, and I'll be stepping out of this meeting and just speaking as ward member.
Thank you. If there are any declarations of interest, sorry, Councillor Mott.
Purely by virtue of being ward member and a neighbour, but I have no other interest in it than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Items requiring urgent attention, none have been brought to my attention, which moves us on to the confirmation of the minutes of the 4th of June and the licensing subcommittee meeting on the 28th of May. I have one comment to make about the licensing subcommittee, just as a note. Since we granted the licence for Uphill Farm, there has been a submission to the Environmental Health Officer by a neighbour that noise which shouldn't have been heard from the site has been heard from site. So that's just being investigated and we'll go through due process. I just thought you'd like to know that. Are there any other comments on the minutes of the last two meetings? Oh, good. On to planning applications, and we have one planning application to consider this morning, which is 099824 FUL, Foxcombe, Lewdown, proposed use of cabin as a holiday let. And as usual, I'll pass over to the, before we proceed to the planning application, I knew I'd forget this. The legal officer just wants to make a few notes.
Okay, this is mainly for the benefit, microphone. Yes, good morning. This is just mainly just to give members of the public a sense of the order of what we do in the committee and the importance of how those decisions are arrived at. So the committee starting point is a statutory one with the development plan policies, together with any other material planning considerations. So that the policies, the JPL or any neighbourhood plans, or what happens to be the joint local plan for where all our policies are contained within that, and any other national policies that are relevant. Material considerations are more difficult to pin down, but they basically relate to the development use of the land. And those material interests must be in the public interest. If they're not material planning considerations about planning, then the committee does not consider those. Decisions must be taken in accordance with the development plan, unless those material considerations say otherwise. So that's something that the committee needs to weigh up as it discusses the applications. And then they need to establish whether the development proposal complies with the development plan as a whole. So they look at the holistic approach and then weigh up the balances. And they must follow the development plan unless there is a very good planning reason not to. There will obviously be conflicting policies that emerge that to deal with different elements of the planning system. and that will involve a very delicate planning, balancing of those planning considerations by the committee when they come to those. So there may be no clear-cut answer, which some of the reports will allude to, and that's where the debate will focus. And then just one of them was a common sense one at the end to say that those policies are just to be read in a common sense way. So whatever the plain English meaning is of those policies is the intended use for those. So I hope that has not confused and clarified rather than not confused. But if anybody's got any questions as we go through, I'm quite happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we now move on to the planning application 099824 full, Foxcombe, Lewdown, proposed use of cabin as a holiday let. And I'll at this stage hand over to the planning officer for her report.
Okay, so most of you went on the site visit, so this will just be a refresher. So this is the site location plan, with obviously all of the access, the site of the cabin, and the route to the drainage field. That's that quite strange projection at the top of the map. And this just is the aerial screenshot. Dartmoor Edge campsite is a pop-up campsite that was previously operated, but it isn't in force anymore, so you can sort of ignore that little marker there. This is the formal site location plan, so you've got the site in red and the other land owned in blue. Well, it's not all of the land that the applicant owns. A slightly enlarged version, so this shows you where the soakaway is and where the cabin is, and it also shows you where the parking for the cabin will be. This is the floor area, so it shows you the little bathroom, the kitchenette, and the sleeping area. And those of you that went on the site visit will remember the timber decked area. Just the elevations for you. So these are some site photos. So the darker area of grass indicates where the parking space would be. So when I took this photo, the applicant had just sprayed a bit of weed killer, so that's why it's a different colour. But this just shows where the parking space would go. And this is the cabin. So you can see that it's enclosed by some quite high boundary hedges. This is a view from inside the cabin. So you've got the door to the bathroom and then the little kitchenette area. And then at the other end, you've got the sleeping area and the sitting area. So this is the view from the cabin looking down towards the garden of the farmhouse, just to show you that you can't really see anything. And this is the view from within the garden of the farmhouse looking up towards the cabin. So the cabin is kind of in the middle of the photo, really, just behind that tree. There has been some reference to bus services, so just to clear up any confusion, this is an extract from the Devon County Council bus map, and it just shows you the route of the service 306 that runs past the site. Now, the text at the top is from Go Cornwall Bus, so we just checked with them to make sure that the service was still a hailing service. And so if you're standing in a safe place and the bus can stop, and as long as you flag down the driver in good time, then the bus will stop for you. You don't have to wait at a fixed bus stop. And this is the timetable. This is just purely for reference. So you've got about 4 services-ish a day in each direction. So that's just to clarify for you. And the key issues, really, we haven't been provided with a locationally specific proven need for tourist accommodation. We consider the location to be isolated, where people are more likely to travel to and from the site in the car, which obviously has a carbon impact that undermines policy Dev 32. And ultimately, we do recognise that there are some economic benefits, but they don't outweigh the harm arising from the development in the unsustainable location. So on balance, we have recommended refusal.
Thank you very much. Any of the committee have a question for the planning officer at this stage? Before we move on to registered speakers, Councillor Kimber.
I wonder if you can help me. I know the principles of sustainable development in the analysis section, and it talks about things like isolated development in the countryside. So how do we weigh the fact that this is a holiday cabin versus a residential home? So like the cabin seems temporary to me, and a home would seem like a permanent thing. So
at the moment, we're assessing the cabin as if it would be a permanent structure. And we do recognise that there are differences in movements associated with a permanent dwelling and a holiday cabin. So, for example, people aren't going to contribute to school traffic because if they're just there for holiday, that sort of thing. But we do need to recognise that people will still want to access shops and pubs and other attractions and services. So we do, we don't discount patterns of movement associated with holiday lets compared to residential.
Come back on that.
please. So are we effectively considering a new home in the countryside? Like in 6.17, it says it's unclear what would happen to the holiday unit where the applicant to cease farming altogether. Does that mean there'd be 2 residential homes there then?
There could be, and that's kind of what we need to consider as part of our determination. But I think we do need to be very, very clear that we're assessing the application as submitted, and it has been submitted as a holiday let. So that is the thing that we need to assess today.
Councillor Guthrie.
Just for historic context, really, the pop-up campsite, do you have any information on how long that had been there or what happened to it?
I did have a very brief chat with the applicant on site, but I think it's probably better that you question them just to make sure that you've got the most accurate and up-to-date information about that.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Moody.
Also for historical information, there was a previous planning application which was refused. How is this different from the previous one?
So it isn't fundamentally different. It was still, they wanted a holiday unit in the countryside. But I think the thing to remember is there have been some changes to legal cases since that previous one was considered. So we do need to make sure that the application is considered on its merits today.
Councillor Mann.
I just was interested in how you would prove locationally specific need for tourist accommodation.
So we've had some appeal decisions that that look at what's in the area around the site, and if there is a shortfall in a particular type of accommodation. I've had applications where applicants have done a kind of a market research exercise with specific reference to disabled access accommodation, and they were able to prove that there were a lot of cottages that had been used, and tents and all sorts of other things, but there wasn't specific wheelchair accessible accommodation, so they were able to demonstrate a need in that sense. But it is certainly a tricky thing to prove in one sense, because you're asking competitors to tell you where their gaps in their business plan are. It is difficult, but we have got appeal decisions where the matter's been considered.
The planning officer would like to make.
So I just wanted to confirm with members, if you were to look at policy Dev 15 in your joint local plan, paragraph 7 talks about holiday accommodation, and it says that any new, it does actually say camping, caravan and chalet, but means any new holiday accommodation should actually respond to an identified local need. And I think that's where the case officer is suggesting that we haven't had sufficient information to demonstrate that there is a local need for this type of accommodation in this location.
Thank you for that. Any other questions before we move on? No? Right, we have 3 registered speakers today. The first is Emily Hayden. I'd like to come up and join us here. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with how these sort of things work, but you have 3 minutes to say what you wish to the committee, and then the committee have an opportunity to ask you questions if they have any. So when you're ready, off you go.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. This application follows an earlier application made in 2020, which was refused as the council felt it was in an unsustainable location. Since that application was refused, an appeal was allowed for 4 holiday pods at the nearby Alder Vineyard. Like the previous Foxcombe application, the older application had been refused due to the site's alleged unsustainable location. However, the inspector found that due to there being a hail and stop bus service along the old A30, guests staying at the pods could use public transport and was therefore considered sustainable. This service is a very short walk from Foxcombe, and it is therefore realistic to say that guests could use this service too. If, despite this recent appeal decision, members feel the site is unsustainably located, that does not mean the application should be refused. Planning law states that planning applications should be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise, which is further reinforced by several paragraphs of the NPPF. The NPPF is in itself a material consideration, as it states that opportunities to maximise public transport will be more limited in rural areas, and that this should be taken into account in decision-taking, and that decisions should appreciate that some developments in rural areas which are needed to support local businesses may not be well served by public transport. It also says that planning decisions should enable farm diversification. This application is for farm diversification, and it is the applicant's need to diversify that is an even stronger and very pressing material consideration. The holiday let would be a critical source of income for the farm, which has been in the family for over 200 years. It would provide an injection of capital which would allow future investment into the suckler herd stock, making its operations to a scale where it's viable, and would also enable the farm to weather future unforeseen events. One such event happened in April this year, when the farm came down with TB, which means it will have no income for a year. This story is not unique to Foxcombe, but it is the stark reality of farming and why so many have to diversify. In order to support the farm, Mr. Spoonser works as a lorry driver. Mrs. Spoonser runs a bakery business, and their son Tom, who wants to take over the farm, has several other jobs. Whilst having second jobs is not unique to farming, it shows they are hard workers and are determined to keep it going. The officer's report suggests other forms of diversification should be considered, such as a bed and breakfast, but this is not feasible as the house is fully occupied with no spare bedrooms. Converting outbuildings is also not possible, as they are all in use by the farm and would cost hundreds of thousands to convert. The proposed holiday let is a necessity here, and I believe the need for it is a material consideration which should be given substantial weight in this decision, in accordance with planning law. To finish, the applicants have advised me that they would be happy with a temporary permission for 3 years, so that is something for you to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, and well done for keeping to the time limit. Are there any questions for Emily Hayden? Councillor Mott.
Thank you. Can you confirm, please, you said it was a short walk. Can you confirm how far it would be to be able to walk to a safe spot to hail the bus, please?
Yeah, it's just over 300 metres.
Sorry, just over?
300 metres.
Are you taking that to the junction?
Just to the left of the junction.
I would argue that's probably not a safe spot, knowing the road.
That's where the applicant's son used to walk to get the bus, and as with many other children in the area, also walked to get the school bus.
Can you also please confirm, because obviously when Alder got their decision on appeal, there was a different bus service running at the time which offered 6 or more routes to and fro. So that's before this current bus service of only 4.
I believe it's the same bus service. Maybe the number of trips has reduced slightly, but it's the same service.
No, I believe it's changed from the 6A to the 306, which is a different company.
I think the number may have changed, the actual number of the service may have changed, but it's still the same route, and then it goes from Oakhampton and it crosses along the old A30.
Any other questions at this stage? No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next registered speaker is Councillor Richard Alexandra, Lew Trenchard Parish Council. Welcome. Same sort of rules apply. 3 minutes to say what you wish to the committee, and then they have an opportunity to ask you questions if they have any.
Certainly.
When you're ready, off you go.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak. A lot of what I say is going to be have already been said. However, I think it bears repeating. I am representing Loudoun Grouped Parish Council, of which Lew Trenchard is a member, and this application falls. The Parish Council does support this application as we believe it will help with the local economic activity and provide additional employment. It poses no significant change to the infrastructure. It provides an additional diversification within the farm, which is in line with current government thinking and has cross-party support, bearing in mind what might happen. Unfortunately, this often conflicts with the JLP, which can sometimes be used as a very blunt instrument. We note the planning officer's concerns regarding vehicle movements. However, we would point out that currently a member of the family travels from the farm to a place of work on a daily basis, and it could be that the additional income would mean they would work on the farm instead, mitigating visitor traffic. We would also point out that vehicle movements by holiday makers would not necessarily occur daily, as their location is close to the Two Castle Way walking route and a number of cycle paths. Although buses may be a rarity in country locations, the local bus is a hailing service, and there is also a bus stop about half a mile away. Should your committee be minded to approve the application, the installation of an EV charging point could be considered to further mitigate any carbon concerns. But please to note that there are no other objections on environmental, drainage and highway concerns. The proposed holiday cabin is currently used as an office. Its location is in the garden area of the farmhouse and buildings and not on agricultural land. Although the applicant has not provided a document showing specific need, the Parish Council is aware of a variety of holiday lets in similar situations, and they are well used. Another local well-used holiday facility was refused planning partly due to the same reasons given by the planning officer, but gained approval on appeal. Whilst we are aware that as the Parish Council we are only an advisory body, we feel that in this circumstance we understand the arguments for and against this application and would ask the committee to support our view that the application should be granted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Alexander from the committee? Nope, you've got off scot-free. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next registered speaker is Councillor Terry Southcott, the ward member. No stranger to the rules of this committee, as he is the vice chair of it. For those listening, he has up to 5 minutes to make a case. So when you're ready, Councillor Southcott, off you go.
Thank you, Chair. My primary reason for bringing this one to committee was to discuss the relationship of DEV 15, support for the rural economy, in regard to the rest of the JLP. In fact, majority of what I was going to say has actually been covered quite well by the previous two speakers. The only thing I'm going to add to this at the moment is, should the committee feel it way to do this, if I've gone off piste a little bit because of the previous speakers. I would propose that the applicants were given time in a way of temporary permission for the holiday let to enable them to build their evidence for need and develop a full travel plan which would ease the situation. Everything else I was going to say is fully covered in the previous speakers, so I really leave my case there. I would sort of urge you to, if you can't see a way to approving it on a permanent basis, then possibly a trial period of up to 3 years would allow them to build the full case that the officers can approve later.
Thank you. Done. Members of the committee, questions for Councillor Southcott? Councillor Guthrie.
Good morning, Terry. Could you just throw any light on the previous pop-up campsite?
Although I've seen it, I'd rather leave that to the actual applicant, if possible. I'm the last speaker. Yes, when it was set up in COVID, it boomed. As restrictions have now eased, I see less and less people actually using that pop-up campsite. And it was run by the applicants' children when they were home from university, etc. So I don't see that actually being that viable at the moment, profit-wise, compared with a permanent holiday let.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Kimber.
Thank you very much. Could you tell me anything more about the farming operations, please?
Basically, no, they're a breeding establishment. They bring them on, they don't fatten them. As was stated just now, they have been lighted by TB, one reactor that's sort of shut their movement down. Other than that, I know very little about their farming operation.
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, we've had all the registered speakers and had an opportunity to ask questions. We're now in debate before I move the recommendation. So if anyone has anything they wish to contribute to the debate before we go towards a decision, now's the time to do it. And the first one up is the planning officer. Senior planning officer.
Yes, members, I just wanted to just make a point for you all so that you consider it during your debate. Clearly, there's local support for this operation to be approved. However, my view is that, and my advice to you is that the planning officer has taken all of the benefits and disbenefits for this proposal into account in coming to her recommendation. It's not an easy balance, these types of applications. As we know, we've had these before us on a number of occasions before, and accepting the impacts that farmers generally are facing, is a very difficult decision for you to make. However, as Mr. Baker indicated to you all in the paragraphs I sent out to you, it is not for planning to resolve that issue. It is for planning to consider the land use and whether it is in the right location, that use is in the right location. And that's obviously emphasised in the development plan. And Policy Dev 15, I think it's a very key sentence at the beginning where it says, support will be given to proposals in suitable locations. And I think that's what you need to consider. Is this a suitable location for this type of use? Clearly we need to support our local farmers, but in this case, our officer has done that and has unfortunately come to the recommendation that it should be refused, and that is in accordance with the development plan. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mann and Councillor Mott.
Sorry, something that was said by one of the speakers just raised a question for me, which was about the other application that was cited, that was appealed and then lost by West Devon. And I just wondered if you could explain the difference between the two.
So when the officers considered it, it wasn't fundamentally different. It was the inspectorate that upheld the appeal and granted planning permission. And they based it on the fact that the occupants of the holiday units would be able to safely walk to the bus stop and they would be able to hail down the service. I don't know if you're familiar with the particular site in question, but there's quite a big visibility display, so the occupants could have stood there and hailed the bus down. But, that's the inspector's decision. We would make our decision based on the joint local plan as it stands today, and kind of consider things, afresh.
Councillor Mott.
Thank you. This is a very difficult one, not only because I know the applicants and it's in my ward, but on a personal level, I don't have an issue with it. However, I have to look at it with my head of planning hat on and the policy and all of those considerations, and unfortunately that has to outweigh any personal feelings that I might have about the application. And as it does not fit with policy, as those policies stand at the moment, I am reluctantly unable to support the grant of this application and will have to go with the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Any other matters of debate? Well, Councillor Moody, you had one, and then I'll come to Councillor Wakeham.
Thank you, Chair. I too would like to thank the officer for a very comprehensive report. I have not predetermined this application and have made, and I am coming to a conclusion based on what I've heard today. I note that there is no, contrary to DV 15, that there's no demonstration of local need. The sustainability issue I'm not completely certain about. However, I noticed that there is the local need for tourist accommodation has to be demonstrated, and the business plan or economic benefit to the farm have not been provided as well. And given those considerations, I am minded to support the officer.
Councillor Wakeham, you have a point.
Thank you. I'm going to focus on sustainability. I'm going to focus on sustainability because I think it is sustainable. I think it ticks all three boxes. Economic is going to be increased finances for the farm. Social, it's supporting a strong and vibrant and healthy community taken from the JLP. They're bound to be employing somebody to help, so that helps the community. And environmental, well, environmental is, it's without putting too much strain on the environment. Nothing can be totally sustainable. There's always a tiny trade-off. And they are, in fact, offering a very low-carbon holiday. And they're very lucky that they're only 300 metres from the road and the bus going by. So for me, it is sustainable. And I feel that we should be supporting traditional local farming families and custodians of the countryside. And farms like this need to thrive, not just survive, to safeguard their future and to encourage future generations to take them on. And I think it's vital support to support the viability of family farms. So that's addressing sustainability. And it is in a beautiful location. I'm sure they'll be very busy. I don't think you need to do a market research. I mean, who doesn't want to come to Devon? So there we go. And also, there's opportunity to walk and cycle, as has been said. So for me, I'm going to support the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kimber, then Councillor Guthrie.
Thank you very much. I note the support of the local parish council, and I think we should listen carefully to the people who live in the community. And they say that it will help with the local economic activity in the area. And they say similar diversification in the parish is well used. I often speak to people who come and stay in West Devon, and they're looking for peace and tranquility from their holidays. So to me, this is maybe enough to make it an identified local need without a big survey. So as far as farm diversification is concerned, it will be a source of income to the farm. And I think the bakery demonstrates their commitment to the local economy. And the holiday accommodation in this location is taking full advantage of the natural environment, which seems like an obvious way to diversify. Just to know, as far as active travel is concerned, it's only 3 miles from Lidford, which is on the Granite Way. I think if I was cycling a long way, it would be a really nice place to stay for a couple of nights. And I would be inclined to support a temporary permission as suggested by the ward member for 3 years.
Thank you. Councillor Guthrie.
Patrick's just highlighted with his last comments what I wanted to say, and I'm very keen on supporting local farming, notwithstanding all the JLP and obviously the officers' considerations. And I think if it's realistic to review and set in place a temporary plan, that's what I would also vote positively for.
Just got one question before we go to a vote on this. One of the hinges on which this pivots seems to be the availability of site-specific need. And I just wonder if for applications like this, each application is obliged to provide its own survey, if that's the right word, own information, or whether we've got a sort of generic view of whether an area has a need.
So it's for each applicant to demonstrate the need, because I think in this case, need would also be partly derived from the need of the wider holding, not just the need for holiday accommodation. But I would make a very clear distinction between need and demand, because obviously who wouldn't want to come to Devon? That's what one of the councillors said. We completely understand that, but need and demand are not the same in planning terms. And so we would stress that applicants need to provide evidence of need.
Thank you. Any other matters of debate before we go to a vote? Well, the proposal in front of us is for refusal. Councillor Kimber.
So I'm not clear. Are we talking about the 3-year temporary permission, or are we talking about, have we just got one vote now where we say yes or no? Or do we have the 3-year option for the 3-year permission?
So you will be, someone will be, hopefully will propose the officer recommendation. You will vote on that. If you go against that recommendation, somebody within the committee will need to make an alternative proposal, and so it would have to be proposed and seconded in both cases.
Is everyone happy about that? We go to the vote on what the proposal is in front of us, and then if there are any alternative proposals after that, that's the time to go to that. So the recommendation is refusal. Can I have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Guthrie, thank you very much. We now go to the vote. So you're voting those in favour of the officer's recommendation, which is refusal, please show.
That's 8, Chair.
Right. Thank you very much. So that is the decision of the committee, refusal. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the planning appeals update.
Both seeking clarity on when there would be a view on a temporary.
Had the motion not been supported, you would have been able to put a alternative proposal to the committee, but the committee decided to support the officer's recommendation, which was refusal. Councillor Kimber.
So that's why I asked the question, what happens? And I was told that after the vote, we would be able to put forward an alternative recommendation.
Well, only if the vote was not to support the officer's recommendation.
Was I told that?
Yes, you were.
Yes, the chairman's right. The motion was, as per the papers in front of you, the recommendation was for a refusal for the reasons that the officer set out in the paper. If that fell, if you didn't agree with that, you would have voted against supporting refusal. If that's not a bit of an oxymoron. And then, if there were enough people, so that vote fell, so it didn't go through, then that's when you put an alternative motion to say, I propose that we do this, this and this, which is what I understood the chairman to be saying.
On record, that wasn't clear to me. Thank you.
Well, I think it was pretty clear that we were voting on the proposal, which was for refusal. I made that very clear when I asked for the vote. So we now move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the planning appeals update. Do you want to go through any particular? Yes,
So members, just going to go through the recent appeal decisions that we've had. You'll note on your agenda that there are quite a lot of appeals been submitted, yet to be determined. But there are 2 which we have had a determination on. First one was for the change of use of a barn to a dwelling, including external alterations and drainage provision at land at Chichicot. The application was refused and the appeal was dismissed. I've just got some plans and an image just to show you where the site was, identified in red there, and on the plan, a slightly larger scale version with the building at the top of the site, and the other greyed out area is land owned by the applicant. This was the proposal, so it was, as I say, a conversion proposal, just so that you know what the proposal looked like. So the refusal reasons were that it was, again, in an unsustainable location, so we're looking at the SPT 1 and 2 policies, the TTV 1 policy, and also Dev 26. I think she might have meant TTV 26, actually, but... Anyway, and then the second reason for refusal was a design one relating to the fact that the conversion proposed did not reflect the agricultural character of the area. In this case, the inspector agreed with the recommendation, the refusal, and dismissed the appeal, and supported us in terms of our settlement policies in terms of SPT 1, 2, and TTV 1. And that both locally and nationally, the accessibility to services and facilities was not achieved. In terms of the design, the conclusion also was that there was a proposal to put large cladding on the building, and also there were a number of new openings, particularly one with a lot of glazing, which is this one over here, and the inspector felt that took away from the character of the building, and therefore was not did think that the impact on the agricultural character was significant enough to dismiss the appeal. The second application is a householder application within Tavistock. It's called Orchard Hill. The location of the site is seen edged red here. Not particularly accurate, but near enough. This is a more accurate site plan. This is Glanville Road running along here, just so that you can familiarise where you are. The application was to add a single-storey addition, as you can see, where my cursor is just there, and also to put a cat slide dormer on the roof, which involved increasing the ridgeline of the property. The officer recommended refusal, and it was refused on the basis that it was unacceptable in terms of its size, design and scale, and the impact it would have on the listed viaduct and other listed buildings and on the conservation area and the World Heritage Site. In this case, the appeal inspector disagreed with the refusal and felt that they didn't feel that the works impacted on the conservation area, and felt that the changes proposed were not did not diminish the character or appearance of either the host dwelling or the conservation area and listed buildings, and it did not undermine the value of the World Heritage Site. And so basically disagreed almost entirely with the potential impact that it had on any historic assets. In considering this, oh, sorry.
Just a question on that.
Yeah.
The dwelling makes limited contribution.
To the conservation area.
Is that negative contribution or positive contribution?
It basically means that it as a building has no significant impact on the assets of the conservation area. Yes, yeah, yeah, and the proposed they didn't feel that it was, yeah. I think what we can learn from this is that whilst a development may not be necessarily acceptable from a design perspective, we have to be very careful when we consider it against all the heritage assets. One, for example, one aspect was that it had an impact on the viaduct. Well, the viaduct is a massive structure within Tavistock, and the impact of a small extension on one dwelling on that was probably a little bit over the top. So I think as officers we need to we need to learn from that. Yeah, so that's it in terms of the appeals. So has anyone got any questions?
Bring anything up on state of appeals? So we now move on to undetermined major applications. Item 7 on the agenda. As before, there are comments in red explaining where each of these are. Has anyone got any particular points they want to make? All done? Okay, that draws to a close this development management meeting. Thank you very much.